to Monday Morning Mindset. Sometimes YouTube and I don't get along, but that's okay. I'm Erin from Girl Catch Fire. Thank you for being here. Today, our topic is how to be a wise elder. And I don't know about you. Well, first let me say, here at Girl Catch Fire, we help women in midlife get unstuck and on purpose and moving into lives of joy and impact. And I don't know about you, but the last couple of weeks, that's been tricky. That's been a tough move. And so I want to talk about it. And I really want to be able to resource myself primarily, and you as well, and help all of us kind of step into some wise elder roles in our community. So that's what today is about. Now, maybe you've had a little bit of trouble focusing. That's been my big thing for the last week or so, is just focus. Like I'm scattered, I'm overwhelmed. I just feel like I've got ADD all over the place, and that's what chaos does. And so we've got some chaos going on right now. And so what I want to do is try to help us through that and give you some strategy. All right. So because the truth is nothing works. Nothing at all works when we're dysregulated. It doesn't. We are breathing shallowly. Our prefrontal cortex isn't online. We're darting from thing to thing. We're in a sympathetic nervous system state, which we're going to talk about a little bit. But the bottom line is nothing works. And to me, this is worth talking about because this is a unique time, in my opinion, for women in midlife just to step out and lead. And to use all that accumulated experience and wisdom and knowledge and empathy and compassion to make a difference in the community that they're in. So how do you become a wise elder? That's what we're going to talk about today. And I don't think it's a secret that our culture just venerates and worships youth. We've talked about that before, and tends to kind of put women out to pasture once they're a certain age. But indigenous cultures and cultures around the world especially do it the exact opposite. It's the women that are the wisdom keepers. They are the stabilizers and the guides for the rest of the community and the culture. They're the ones that transmit the education and the knowledge, hold the center, hold the line. Okay, what if that's true for us too, but maybe we just forgot for a minute? So how do you even do that when things feel so nutty and so out of control? Okay, well, let's talk about it. So first of all, I want to say, don't look at me because I have been so dysregulated and so panicky and whatnot. And so oftentimes when I have that problem, I'm like, okay, well, I can't be the only person that feels this way. I'm going to try to figure it out and then help other people figure it out as well. So I'm pointing to a friend of mine that somebody that I used to work with when I worked for Mercy Ships. And Mercy Ships, if you don't know, runs the largest civilian hospital ships in the world. There's 2 of them. And they provide surgeries and healthcare infrastructure to places that don't have that availability. So it's a really wonderful organization. And I worked for them about 10 years ago. For about 4 years, I worked at their headquarters in Texas. And there was a guy that I worked with there, Captain John Fadley. And if you happen to be a Mercy Shipper watching this, you know Captain John. But, I brought him up today because I wanted to give you guys an example of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this wise elder leadership and the components of it. And I thought of Captain John. And he was I didn't know him well. He was a colleague, but he was kind of in leadership with Mercy Ships, and he was in the maritime department, and obviously he's a captain of the ships. And I remember he was a devout Catholic, and he was a really kind guy, not in a passive way at all. There was a time when he was on board being the captain, and there was a hurricane, a cyclone, headed towards the ship in Madagascar. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, ooh, that's terrible. But at least Captain John is at the helm. That guy would walk into a meeting and I would think, okay, everything's going to be fine. Captain John is here. And it was because he had this kind of steadiness and depth and a lot of humility but he was also a really, really good leader. I remember also during that time, there was a situation on the ship where there were some stowaways, which is not really ever a good thing. They got it sorted. But I remember people saying that later, Captain John called a meeting of the whole crew and apologized and took full responsibility for that situation, even though, stuff happens, right? But just the fact that he took full responsibility for it and apologized to everybody for the delays it caused and the chaos and whatever. And I thought, it's funny because I bet you $1, John doesn't remember me. Maybe he does, I don't know. But I remember him. And the point that I want to make to you is that also don't forget that people are watching. People are watching you when you don't know anybody's watching. And so this is what I'm talking about with this kind of wise eldership that I want to encourage us into in this season that we're in, is this sort of graceful, kind, confident, regulated leadership that I saw in Captain John, and others too. Certainly, he's just the example I'm using. But the question is how? What are the components of that, and how do you even do it? Okay, well, so that's what I was breaking down and trying to figure out. And the first piece of it, I think, is steadiness. Just learning how to be steady when things are careening. Really, really important. So how do you become a steady, wise elder? Like when people are freaking, arguing, terrified, all sorts of chaos is going on, how do you stay steady? That's a really good question. And there's one concept that I teach my clients all the time. It's called polyvagal theory. It was developed by a guy named Dr. Stephen Porges. And I teach this all the time because I feel like people don't know this. Polyvagal theory holds that basically you have a couple of different states in your nervous system and you're switching between them all the time. You know the description of fight or flight or freeze. People know that, but there are names for it. And there are reasons that they feel kind of terrible and they feel the way they do. Well, if you are aware that you are simply having a nervous system response, it's sometimes easier to get it under control. So here's the basics. Here's what you need to know. At the very bottom is this old nervous system response that we have evolved with. It's called dorsal vagal. And that's that shutdown. That's that feeling of hopelessness. That's that feeling of, I can't do anything about this. I'm stuck. And there are reasons that evolved that way. But a dorsal vagal shutdown is when you're getting back in bed and pulling the covers up over your head. It can prompt depression and whatnot. And then above that is sympathetic, the fight or flight, where you're just racing around and trying to solve everything and in a panic. And you know this. It's when your breathing is shallow and quick and everything feels like you're irritated and worried and panicked and fearful. That's a nervous system state, okay? And then above that, though, is the ventral vagal state, which is where you're connected and safe and mindful and grounded and your prefrontal cortex is online. This is where we want to be. This is where the wise elders live. Now, nobody lives in one nervous system state all the time, so cut yourself some slack. But what I want to tell you is you've known that shutdown feeling and you've known that dysregulated feeling, but you've also known what it is to be settled and grounded and connected and safe. And there's a lot of ways that you can get there, but here's what I want you to take away is that you are 100% responsible for the state of your nervous system. It doesn't do you or anybody any good for you to be racing around in a sympathetic nervous system state all the time. Sometimes it's useful, but not all the time. And same thing with the dorsal vagal state. I'll drop a link down to some of this materials in case you're furiously taking notes, but we want to be in that ventral vagal state where we can make good decisions and we can be clear and calm and steady and resilient, okay? And so breath work is one great way to get there. Getting out of that dorsal vagal state where you're just stuck. Sometimes the simplest thing to do is to get up, and you're not going to want to. But to get up and move your body is how we get out of that. Breathing is a great way to calm down an upregulated nervous system state. Okay, the 4-5-8 breath. Inhale for 4, hold for 5, release for 8. I teach my clients that one all the time. So here's the deal, guys. Being steady is an inside job. Nobody is going to do it for you. We have to do it for ourselves. All right. And anything, any response, any way that you plan on participating with other human beings in the world right now will go better if you are managing your own nervous system and not requiring it from anybody else. If you are regulating your nervous system and your emotional world, okay? So that's really the first, I think, one of the first steps in being steady is doing what it takes to get yourself out of a dorsal vagal state, out of a sympathetic nervous system state, and into a ventral vagal state. What do you have to do? The second thing is being strong. So one of the things that I've decided is that I need to identify the things in my life that are weakening me right now and eliminate them. And honestly, ironically, the biggest thing that weakens me right now is scrolling. And I've been banging the drum on this for months. The problem with scrolling is you feel like you're getting informed, but more often we're getting inflamed. And if you don't have any intention of doing anything with the information that you are receiving by scrolling, what are you doing? Chances are you're upregulating your nervous system without much plan for downregulating it. Have you considered that? I think all of us know to some degree that a social media habit can be very, it can be harmful, and it can be definitely an avoidance. I mean, that's why it's called doom scrolling, because we're avoiding something else. But if it's not helping you, I would really recommend you consider putting limits on your phone using one of the apps to cut your screen time, or at least to make you more conscious of why you're getting on the screen. Because if it is just making you stomp around with Rage Against the Machine on the soundtrack, and listen, there might be a place for that. But if you're doing it all the time, I would submit that that is not going to help you be strong. It's actually going to weaken you. Maybe. At least consider the possibility, okay? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and I bet this is something that Captain John did all the time, but the Apostle Paul in Romans 12 said, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but instead be transformed by the constant renewal of your mind. There's your meditation, stillness, and prayer. It's the exact opposite of doom scrolling. And how do we get strong? Is by renewing what's going on up here rather than jumping on any old, just whatever is delivered up to us, consuming whatever is delivered up to us. So this idea of being strong is to identify like what it is that weakens you and stop doing that. There's a lot of things. I just pick social media because I always pick on it. But stillness, prayer, meditation, contemplation, it's a great way to start your day if you plan to be strong, if you know that you're going to need to be strong for your community. It's a good way to start. Third thing is to be purposeful. What's your purpose in this time? May not be forever, might just be right now. Right now, if you can't think of one, let me give you a hint. Let me give you an option. Co-regulation. Now, your own nervous system is your responsibility. That's self-regulation and doing breath work or getting up and doing jumping jacks, or there's all kinds of strategies to help you get from a sympathetic fight or flight state into a dorsal vagal state. But you know what's another great one? Is co-regulation. When we get around other people. All right, and that might be hugging, that might be singing, that might be chanting, that might be exercising, that might be playing soccer or frisbee or whatever. But being with others is so critically important for our nervous systems, and it's underestimated. How many of you have felt like isolating because everything feels like it's way too much? Okay, that makes sense, but what are you going to do about it? So a great way also to be with others and be connected with others is to serve. To get into a system with other people that are pulling the wagon in the same direction, that are serving the community in some way. And I am talking a hyper-local way, all right? Where you're actually meeting the needs of people in your neighborhood or people in your town if your town is small. People in your part of town, One way my clients are doing this, there's an organization called Lasagna Love. Look it up. It's fabulous. LasagnaLove.org, I think it is. And it's just basically a network of people. People submit a request for someone, they need some food and they need a lasagna. And then they hook them up with other people to make one. And then you make the lasagna and you drop it off at someone's house. That is a way that you can be both involved in your community, supportive of your community, being a wise elder in your community by being connected to the needs of other people and taking care of your own nervous system and your own needs for connection and belonging. It's just one way, but there's lots of ways. My point in all this in saying is that by being steady and strong and purposeful, this is how we begin to reclaim the wise elder role. Like we take back the narrative about what it means to be a woman in midlife. Like, oh, you're just kind of put out to pasture, or you're retiring or whatever. No, this is a time where you can be incredibly powerful and you can be seen as a leader. You can be a leader, but it's an inside job. The change has to start here because it's not about control. It's about leadership. And this is what I want to encourage you guys to think about today. Is like, how can I step into my own wise elder role to stabilize, to guide, to lead, to resist, if that's what's called for, and to hold my community together? That's my challenge. I hope you guys have a great day.